Welcome to a world of thinkers, dreamers, and doers. A place where intellectual curiosity and active research accelerate entrepreneurship and innovation before bringing them into being. This is the Roberto C. Goizueta Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Within Atlanta's vibrant heart, the center is a nexus for the Goizueta and Emory community, serving entrepreneurs to investors, students to startups. This is an intimate environment where connections are easily made and relationships are readily built, making the center a microcosm that offers macro opportunities. This is where you'll find a cultivated entrepreneurial ecosystem, bristling with possibilities that foster partnership with the business community surrounding us, a growing, unique network of businesses and organizations. Tomorrow has to start somewhere, and we're defining the future right here. Don't think of it as an idea incubator as much as a curiosity super collider. The center blurs lines across disciplines, programs, and areas of expertise, serving to connect ideas to resources, founders to mentors, and the classroom to the community. And while great minds think differently, this is where they come together, uncovering intersections of entrepreneurship and innovation that elevate business while bettering society. We meet our community of entrepreneurs and innovators where they are, and then empower, educate, and inspire them to get where they're going. It all starts here at the Roberto C. Goizueta Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation.
Welcome to the second in a series of panel discussions in recognition of the launch of the Roberto C. Goizueta Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. I'm Rob Kazanjian, Academic Director and Professor of Organization and Management. The creation of the center represents an expanded scope and elevated commitment to entrepreneurship and innovation at the business school, and we're grateful to the Goizueta Foundation, which generously supported it in their 2019 gift to the school. The center has three areas of focus, which will be represented across the panel discussions that we have had and will have. Number one is entrepreneurship, the support of students and alumni in the launch of their new business ideas. Second, investing, the development of competence and connections in support of financing and funding of new businesses. And third is innovation, providing opportunities to study best practice related to innovation in large, complex organizations. So across these areas, we run a portfolio of programs ranging from Pitch the Professors, where students get to support their early ideas and business models, to the Startup Launch Accelerators, where those with promising ideas can come to validate their business idea, as well as consumer demand and other elements of their journey, all the way through to what we call the Raise Forum, where more established startups can pitch to angels and VCs as they seek funding. I want to take a moment to thank the team that has made this center possible as we've worked over time. The team consists of myself, Andrea Hershatter, who I'll introduce more fully in a moment, Professor Charlie Getz, who will moderate our panel on Thursday evening. He teaches entrepreneurship, and Amelia Schaffner, the Director of Entrepreneurship Programs, who will moderate our session on innovation. We also want to be sure you're aware of the subsequent events we are having. So we hope you'll be able to join us, not just for this evening as you are here, but also we're going to do a session on investors, panel discussion of alums in the investment space on Thursday evening at this same time period. And then on Monday, the 22nd, we're going to do a panel on innovation in large companies. So with that, I'm now pleased to introduce the moderator of tonight's panel on entrepreneurship, and that is my colleague and friend, Andrea Hershatter. Andrea is the Senior Associate Dean for the BBA programs. She's had that position for more than 20 years, and I feel has handcrafted that program to be the highest rated program in our portfolio. It's regularly recognized as a top 10 program in the US. She's also my faculty colleague in organization and management. She's been here from the beginning of entrepreneurship at Emory and teaches regularly in the BBA program. In that program, she has won multiple service and teaching awards and is the architect and continues to deliver one of our very successful programs, which is the Entrepreneurship Summit. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, who will then introduce our panel. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's an honor to be here and a thrill to be amongst some of our BBA alumni who have gone on to become entrepreneurs. I know that there are more in the audience and some who aspire to it. For the few of you who listen to me and remember BBA orientation, I think that you might recall that the most important message I gave you was that you are each other's most valuable network. And tonight is just one example of the incredible resources that our alumni provide to each other, particularly in the entrepreneurial space where the ability to connect and forge partnerships is so essential. So we are going to chat with 3 of our entrepreneurial alumni. What I'm going to have them do is in course introduce themselves, and then we'll have sort of 3 little sections of commentary where I will ask questions, but at the same time, if you will look in the bar on your Zoom, you will see a Q&A box there. My colleague Amelia Schaffner will be moderating that, and at the end of the session that is more formal, she will ask your questions of the panelists on our behalf. So I will start, I'm going to go alphabetically for want of a better method. I will start with Spencer Barkoff. Spencer graduated from the BBA program not so very long ago, 2013. On campus, he, among many activities, helped found a then nascent entrepreneurial idea called the Emory Campus Bubble, and became CEO of that endeavor, leading it to great expansion across multiple universities and a successful exit. He then became a consultant at Techstars Atlanta, and on the way to doing that, a second-time founder of a company called RoadSync, which was a digital payment platform for the transportation industry. That led him to what he does now, which is he is president of Relay Payments, which provides payment options and simplifies transactions for the logistics industry. So that's just high level who he is. Spencer, will you tell us just a drop more about yourself and your venture?
Sure. Thanks, Andrea. My name's Spencer. I'm originally from New York. Came down to Atlanta to go to Emory, and as Andrea said, graduated in 13 and haven't left since. Currently, I'm the president of Relay Payments, which I founded with my co-founder, Ryan Droege, about 2 years ago. We operate as a payment option in the logistics space, streamlining and automating lots of different payments that truck drivers need to make on the road, adding a lot of different value to different elements of the supply chain.
Thank you so much. Faizan Bhatty is also a BBA, 2014. When he left us, he joined Google and spent 4 years there in digital growth and marketing, and then left that to attend a little school in Pennsylvania. And when he was at Wharton working towards his MBA, he met a group of people with whom he co-founded a company called Halo Cars. Halo enables Uber and Lyft drivers to earn incremental income by using their cars as digital outdoor advertising. That was quite a run, short but meteoric. And about this time last year, Halo was acquired by Lyft, and Faizan now heads up Lyft's strategic partnerships and was very recently named to Forbes 2021 30 under 30 in advertising and marketing. Would you tell us a little bit more about your journey?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Andrea. So as Andrea mentioned, I co-founded a company called Halo Cars. We got acquired a little too early. We got acquired within a year of our inception. So had a lot of experiences both building the company and now also being one of the founding members of Lyft Media. And a pleasure to be here. I was at Emory as an international student, so really enjoyed my time in Atlanta, and I'm currently in Phoenix, but based out of San Francisco.
So it is now my pleasure to introduce Caren Kelleher, who gets an extraordinary award for unbelievable diligence. She is joining us from Austin, Texas, where they have 5 inches of snow, not common for Austin, I'm sure you know, and no power. She is dialing in by phone and doing the best she can to stay connected to us. So just a little bit about Caren. She graduated with a BBA degree as well and served as director of marketing for Paste magazine before going to Harvard, where she received her MBA. She then headed up business development at Songkick before joining Google, where she helped launch Google Play and ran the music affiliate program. She is now the founder of an Austin, Texas company called Gold Rush Vinyl, which is a rapid turnaround record pressing plant. And Caren and Gold Rush were named one of Fast Company's most innovative companies of 2020. Caren, thank you so much for being here. You're muted.
I unmuted on the phone. Can you hear me now? Okay. I mean, we have no power and it's 19 degrees outside, so I'm glad to be here. I owe so much to my time at Emory. It's where I first learned about what entrepreneurship was through interning down the street in Decatur, Georgia at a small music magazine, and loved that I could come to Emory as a freshman and not have to declare a major, but get to explore what I wanted to do, because I certainly never thought I would own a factory and drive a forklift and all of the things I've gotten to do now. And, you know, running a small business as an entrepreneur is really special to me. So I'm so excited to see what Goizueta is doing and to be a part of it today.
Thank you so much, Caren. I thought we would start with the first of 3 topics, which has to do with sort of this act of venture creation. And maybe Caren, since I have you first, maybe you would kick us off with did you have an aha moment? When did you know it was time to leave what was obviously a very prestigious and sought after position and start your own company?
I definitely had a couple smaller aha moments before the big one, but I was, you know, my time at Google was so powerful, but prior to that, I graduated with my MBA from HBS in the recession, and it was really hard to get jobs at the time. And consequently, I kind of was forced into starting my own small band management company. I started a side hustle managing bands. And as a band manager, you're essentially the COO of that organization that makes everything run. That carried me into Google, and at Google, they let me keep having this hobby as a band manager. And what I started to see while I was in this, you know, different career path of one, having a corporate music job and also on the side helping these smaller artists, was the reality of what the music industry was going through. And that is digital, for all it does for us with Spotify and YouTube and access to music, pays musicians very little compared to what they used to make selling CDs and albums. And a couple of years ago, we started seeing young fans come up to the merch table and ask for vinyl records. And I would ask them, do you even own a record player? And it started to reveal this thing that's happened in culture where people have this want for owning music again, to own the artwork, to experience an album. And vinyl was having this huge resurgence. I started seeing that on the ground level while also in my corporate job seeing, you know, the realities of what digital music could do for musicians. And the aha moment for me was giving a presentation at Google about the state of the music industry and having to explain to tech community at the company that the average American band will make the same money if they sell 100 vinyl records that they will from 2.5 million YouTube views. And that was my aha moment. Like, wow, vinyl is going to be a much bigger part of the music industry. And then from market validation I was doing was finding there were not enough factories in the world to support the demand for vinyl. And it started this curiosity that led me eventually to start my own factory that could help to support this. But I look back on all of those little moments. I think entrepreneurship is so much of this, is these little moments where you say, I see a problem here. Has anybody else solved it? And if not, why? And digging into it more. And it's led me to a really wonderful career that is very different than my corporate one and has all kinds of different challenges day to day. But I really love going to work every day and seeing my team and seeing the problems that we get to solve.
One of the things I love about your story is that the person you convinced in your presentation was most importantly you, and that's what led you to do it. It's a wonderful and inspiring story. Spencer, I've known you, I feel like, from the beginning, and I've never known you not to be an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about how you knew that was the path you wanted to follow.
Yeah, I guess I've always been doing entrepreneurial things all the way back to high school. And I think that Emory, and especially your class and Charlie's class, allowed me to kick off our first venture, which we wrote the business plan in your class. And so since then, I think I was at UBS my junior summer, and I remember thinking, I really don't want to work at a bank, and came back to your class. We wrote the business plan, and led to some funding from Emory University. And so I got the opportunity to not have to go the corporate route and start our first venture after school. And that kind of, to today, led me on that path.
Yeah. I can really see where that was in your blood and you knew you wanted to do it from the beginning. And I'm wondering, Faizan, if that was the same for you, because you went from sort of a marquee corporation to a prestigious MBA program that was probably an investment in a career that might not have been one on your own. What was your moment, and did you have any angst about it?
Yeah, so mine was a little bit different. I hadn't always thought that I'd be an entrepreneur, but I got exposed to snippets of it at Google. There was this organization within Google called Google for Entrepreneurs. So I used to work as a 20% project volunteer for that. And essentially we would work with other entrepreneurs that were typically Y Combinator backed, and you would help them grow fourfold, fivefold using Google's resources. Just working very closely with those smaller companies and those very lean startups, it just exposed me to a whole different world I'd never been exposed to. So that, I think, planted the initial seed. And then at Google, part of my job was managing these marketing funds for very large organizations. And I realized just how sophisticated digital ads are, yet a lot of these large corporations continue to invest a good number of resources into out-of-home advertising, which was at that time just completely obsolete. You think about your typical billboards and your taxi ads, there's just no measurement or targeting component attached to it. Yet at Google, the same client was holding us to a whole different standard. So that kind of helped get the light bulb go off in my head. And I said, there's definitely a world in which you can connect the two. And there's also this other problem I saw of rideshare drivers just not being able to earn enough to be able to sustain their lives. So at Wharton, I came across a few other colleagues of mine who felt the same need and felt the same urge to transform digital advertising for out of home and also help these other rideshare advertisers earn passive incomes. So we started working together at Wharton. I ended up dropping out of the program, and we moved to New York City. We raised a pre-seed round. We hired employees, got an office, and before you knew it, we just hit the ground running. And it was the most fun time I've ever had in my career. And we can talk more about that later too. But I just think it's fantastic. There's very low barriers to entry, especially in this type of an environment. And there's just so many things that are ripe for disruption.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe we could keep going just for a minute, and you could talk about sort of this thing that propelled you, which a little bit was people and a little bit was place, right? So you came from San Francisco or the Valley, sort of this dynamic entrepreneurial space, and entered a similar one in grad school. Was that particularly pivotal to you in feeling like you could launch?
Absolutely. I think a large part of it was for myself, eliminating barriers to entrepreneurship that I think a lot of people face, that when you're when you're successfully employed at a large organization, it's very hard to leave and say, I'm going to start something. It's also very hard to do it on the side. So business school to me was a forcing function of leaving Google, being unemployed, and just having those barriers removed for me. And then being in an environment where I could go and kind of gut check different ideas with professors, do different trial runs through Wharton. They had this separate funding resource. So we had actual dollars that we could attach to trial and error. So all those things combined, I think it was the perfect place to do it. And the last part was just a safety net. If I left Google and started this and things didn't work out, I would have had to go back to the job market. It would have been potentially difficult to re-recruit out of a structured environment. But when you're in a school environment, there's options for leave of absences. So you can take them, experiment with ideas. And if all goes to nothing, if it all fails, you can always go back to campus and re-recruit. So that safety net also was something that I really had to take advantage of.
Thank you. Spencer, maybe you could give a shout out to our hometown here. I'm wondering what you found in the Atlanta ecosystem that was conducive to now your third venture, and maybe even a little bit about how you think about the value of incubators, accelerators. I feel like you have particular insight having been a part of Techstars Atlanta as well.
Sure. Well, especially around payments, right? Home to WorldPay, NCR, Global Payments. I mean, we operate in the fintech space, and it's been tremendously valuable for us. After I left Campus Bubble, I was able to join Techstars Atlanta and saw hundreds and hundreds of companies go to market and really started to understand what worked and what didn't. And I think the main conclusion is it's all about people. Right. I think they instilled in me that the 5 most important things in a venture are people, market, product, and in that order. And I think it was a huge advantage for us as we started to see what would work and what didn't work. The Atlanta ecosystem has been amazing. We've leveraged Georgia Tech a lot, including an Emory through ATDC, which is the Atlanta Technology Development Center. That, along with the Atlanta Village up in Piedmont, up in Buckhead, has really been very advantageous for us as we've continued to take our company to market.
And Caren, your story is a little different because correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you had a co-founder along the way. I know you're close to your sister, but she's not a co-founder, right? So 1, what was it like to launch on your own? 2, what was it like to launch as a woman, especially in Texas and especially in a manufacturing field?
Great questions. Yeah, I do not have a co-founder. And part of that, honestly, was in living in San Francisco, even with a Google salary, you had to have roommates if you weren't married. So I lived in houses with other entrepreneurs, and I watched some very smart people that were doing very well get kicked out of their own companies because of board dynamics, because of founder squabbles. And I just watched how difficult that can be if you don't find the right co-partner.
We've lost your sound. I see you, but I don't hear you. Maybe turn off your picture, might help.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry,
No, I know. We know. It might be better with no video.
Everybody's hitting the cell tower. I had watched a lot of people get kicked out of there. Just about that need for a technical co-founder. I needed to have a really strong manufacturing team. So consequently, what it's meant for me, I still own 100% of my company. We're largely funded by SBA loans for manufacturers. It's meant that I call on my advisory board a lot more, and that I've had to seek out lenders that I've involved, heavily in the business. I keep them as updated as I would a regular investor who sits on my board. And honestly, in COVID, that's been really important because when I need to make a phone call to get PPP loans, they already know that we have been on top of our business. They feel invested in it. It's just been a very different track than I would have gone through had I stayed in Silicon Valley and started a tech startup there. And one of the reasons I moved to Texas, honestly, it is an incredible community for women entrepreneurship. immediately felt very supported by the economic divisions here in Texas. And in fact, I'm calling you from a friend's house. I've been really blessed to have a lot of female, entrepreneurs and just exceptional women in my life here in Austin, one of whom's letting me do the Zoom from her house because I don't have power at mine. But it's just wonderful. And especially, manufacturing, music, and startup ecosystems are not traditionally led by women. It can be a really lonely place. And so I've had to really build my own personal board of directors, if you will, to help me through those times where I need assistance or resilience or insight that I can't get for myself.
So while I've got you here and this connection is, at least for the moment, steady, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that business, sort of what's your secret sauce? How did you know this would work? And what do you bring to what you do that's maybe different from what other people are doing in the same space?
Well, first and foremost, if you're not familiar with vinyl, those of you listening in, so vinyl has become $1 billion industry again. And in fact, over Christmas, it had its top sales week in US history, if you can believe that. It's an industry that has been booming, right? Andrea, I know Andrea loves vinyl, so that's exciting for us, but it's an industry that hadn't had a lot of fresh eyes put on it in a very long time, since the 70s, 80s, really. And what I think I bring to it is I'm not a vinyl person. I didn't hold on to that format with like love and say, it's going to come back like my competitors did. And God bless them that they did that because we had capacity to make records. But I came in as a business student who looked at the problem and said, this is an industry that has crazy turnaround times, very inefficient manufacturing, very wasteful manufacturing. And if you just look at it as a business case study, it felt easier for me to dissect because I didn't have the preconceived notions about the industry. I didn't have the habits or, what I hear a lot in this industry is that's the way it's always been done. That's gotta get on board. And my team just isn't like that. No one on my team, including our press operators who make the records, has actually worked in vinyl before. And that's very on purpose and by design. I wanted a team that were gonna come in and be good problem solvers, quick learners, and be humble enough to, just accept the information being brought to them, to go out and seek it all out. That's our real secret sauce. And what that allowed us to do is to build a more efficient factory with a proprietary design that is less wasteful and allows us to manufacture records 3 times faster than the rest of the industry. And it's just because we looked at the business problem with fresh eyes and said, well, why couldn't I be the one to do that? And it takes a lot of, I don't know, naivete, I guess, to jump in and do that. But we're very, very lucky that, the business foundations I learned at Goizueta in the classroom translate to what we're doing now.
It's a terrific model with a singular vision. Spencer, I feel like maybe you've had a couple more pivots along the way. Can you talk a little bit about your business model now and how you came to it and maybe any adjustments you made as you got there?
Sure. I think, like Caren said, it's about an industry outsider coming in and really seeing how to disrupt what everyone's been used to for the last 40 years. We spent hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours sitting at warehouses around the United States, your Krogers, your Publix, your Dollar Generals, and watched how these legacy payments took place. And a lot of them, I always have one at my desk through these really weird specific checks. And said, how is this still possible in 2020 or 2018 at the time? Really, we listened to our customers, and our pivots really were based on where they told us to go. I have a technical co-founder. I'm more of the business side, and really sat at the warehouse watching how these payments got made. We started on the merchant acquiring side, so really understanding how they accept payments and built a solution there, and then heard from our customers, wait a minute, from the issuing side, we want to also replace the check. And our business model is a SaaS fee and a transaction fee. And again, it was really built on validating those ideas through our customers and listening to what they had to say.
Thank you. And Faizan, I know you have sort of a literal on the ground, or maybe I should even say on the road, proof of concept. Can you tell us a little bit about how you started, how you knew it was right, and then sort of how it scaled from there?
Yeah, definitely. So for those that don't know, Halo Cars basically attaches these smart monitors on the roofs of vehicles. And as the cars drive around, we tailor the advertising and the measurement component of it based on where the vehicle is located, who's around the vehicle, what events are happening around the vehicle. So you can think of it as a large network of digital billboards on wheels. So the way, to answer your question, the way we first validated this concept was, so nobody had tried this before. We didn't know if it actually worked or not. So we attached one of our MVP monitors on the roofs of one rideshare driver's vehicle while we were in Philly. We paid this guy some money. We begged him that please put this on your vehicle for just a week. We'll take it off afterwards. It's not going to damage it. And while we did that, we only showed content for Halo Cars. And I ran a Google Ads campaign on the side just to see how many people would search for Halo Cars as a car was driving around. So I compiled that data for the week, and I overlaid the source, the geo source for these searches with the actual driving patterns for Tony's vehicle. So then I could actually see that, okay, all the exact locations where this car was driving on a map, that's exactly where all these searches came from at those same exact times. And that was single-handedly the most powerful slide in our pitch deck when we went to investors and said, this technology actually works. And then we later built on more measurement components to it as well. So as the vehicle is driving around, how do we know someone actually takes an action after looking at that? And a lot of that's borrowed from my old life at Google and my co-founder's life at Microsoft. But the initial crux of it is literally just putting one unit on top of a vehicle and running a small Google Ads campaign.
Thank you. Spencer, talk to me about money. How do you feel about bootstrapping versus going after it? What do you see as some of the pros and cons? What have you observed amongst your network, people happier one direction or the other?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of bootstrapping. So we started this company, we didn't even incorporate before lining up our first customers. Both did consulting on the side in order to maintain as much equity as possible to get this thing started. Once we lined up our big customers on both sides of our network, we then took that story to raise a small seed round, about $1 million, which really allowed us to hire some folks and get going. But all throughout that time, we took as little money as we could, really to start generating revenue, and really believe that you have to start. We took mock-ups, and that's what we sold to the customers. We didn't, overdevelop before bringing it to them. So big proponent of doing as much as you can with as little as possible. And then at the right times, using money and capital to accelerate the growth. And that's what we've really done here through the first couple rounds of Relay.
And Caren, you two talked about the advantages of not being a sole proprietor, but how in the world does one build a factory without going after venture capital? Oh, you might be frozen again. I will come right back to you and maybe ask. Oh, wait, there you go. Speak.
You're doing it, guys. You're doing it despite the weather. So this is a true story. And when I had quit Google to start my own company, I wasn't sure what it was going to be yet, but I had time, which I think is so important when you're in the rush of, achievement and opportunity and things like that. I took time to sit down and think and write my plan out. And I came up with the business plan for Gold Rush Vinyl, and I started looking into, can you get funding for manufacturing without venture capital? It's not I run a business that has scale constraints. I'm not going to, be a internet company that sells for 10X. So I took my deck and I got a meeting at Wells Fargo in downtown San Francisco, who are a huge SBA lender, pitched them for a half an hour, and I walked out with a $500,000 loan commitment. And I called my family and I said, I think I have to start a factory now. I think that's what I just committed to doing, just by the, can you see me? Am I frozen?
No, you're good.
Okay, I'm good. Sorry, it keeps breaking up. But yeah, it turns out, and this is something that, especially in startup kind of culture in San Francisco, you don't learn as much about the funding that is available for small businesses in America. And I talk a lot about, I'm proud to be a small business. I'm not a tech startup. I'm like many other Americans who are building their businesses in this way. And what we've had to do over time is to add on more lenders and balance that though with cash flow and balance that with revenue and bring on some friends and family investors to help us grow so that we're not servicing too much debt. I've learned so much by just knocking on doors, taking meetings with banks. Oftentimes I find it's like the most casual connections that lead to fruitful conversations. Some of our investors who are friends and family investors, I've actually never met. They just love vinyl, heard about us, have put money in, versus some that I will pitch for, weeks at a time and then find out that it's a no. But, I think in whatever I do next, there's so much value in just pitching different communities and, just asking the question. If I hadn't gone to that bank and said, would you consider funding a vinyl factory? I wouldn't have been able to create the 10 jobs I have and help the thousands of musicians we've had. It was just a curiosity, but very different path than other startups. And I'm grateful I got to learn that side of it.
Yeah, so this is great for us because Spencer's did bootstrap. You actually got a loan. Faizan, talk to us about both things, both about winning, getting some funding by winning some competitions, and then maybe also a little bit you alluded to earlier that you thought you exited too quickly. So maybe a drop about that as well. Yeah,
of course. So in terms of the competition win, so we actually did end up raising a pre-seed round as well. The competition wins are, it's non-dilutive funding. Anyone that can get access to it should. A lot of organizations and schools offer these things, different kind of competitions you can compete in. You also learn a lot about the process. So as Caren mentioned, the more different audiences you present your idea to, the more learning you get, the more feedback you get. And all of it is helpful. There's no such thing as bad feedback. So we did a lot of these competitions internally at Wharton, at the larger Penn community. We got about, I think it was $50,000, $60,000 from that. And that's what helped us get our first set of monitors from China to the US. We needed more money, so we went and raised a pre-seed round. And it was through an angel-led round. We also pitched to venture capital funds, and it was just a lot faster to go the angel route than the larger VCs for a lot of reasons. And then we grew our team, we got our office, and we expanded operations. We started in New York City, we expanded to Chicago. We had a little bit of operation in Atlanta. I don't know if you ever saw our vehicles there, and then some in Philadelphia. The acquisition was interesting because we actually were timing ourselves for a very large seed round towards the end of the year. And we started talking to Lyft for partnerships. We launched this feature called the Pickup Assist. So on the monitor, it would actually show the driver's license plate when the passenger would request for a pickup. As you can imagine, a sea of black Toyota Camrys, you get out of the airport in LaGuardia, it's easy for you to spot which one's yours, but it actually shows a license plate on the top. And that got a lot of attention. Forbes wrote a piece about that for safety and a lot of other press as well. But we wanted to integrate that completely with both Lyft and Uber. We started talking to them solely in just partnerships. And then, we had our first call with them, the second call, third, fourth, fifth. And by the time the sixth call rolls around, Lyft C-suite started getting involved. And we were like, that's kind of odd. Why is there C-suite talking to a small company like us on partnerships? And then they expressed their intent on building this together. They value the tech that we had built. They value the team. They value the small amount of time in which we were able to scale into multiple markets. And then we kind of negotiated for about 2 months, and we got to a acquisition price that made a lot of sense. So it would have been a disservice for us on our shareholders front for us to say no. And the larger order point there was that the Lyft kind of made it clear that they were doing this with or without us. So our two options were we could either partner with Lyft or we could compete with them. And as a startup with about 12 employees, we were in no capacity to compete with them. Plus, we relied on their platform for their drivers. So long story short, we ended up signing the acquisition agreement. I've been at Lyft for a little over a year. It's been fantastic. We have all the resources in the world to be able to scale this out now. There's less pressure from our investors to turn this into a profit-making machine, so we can actually sustainably grow this over time. But it was a very jam-packed time leading into the fundraising and then the acquisition terms.
That's quite a series of adventures and decision-making moments. And I wonder if I could transition that in these last 5 minutes before we turn to audience Q&A. I'd like to get from each of you some perspective or lessons learned. Either, you know, I kind of wanted to ask you what scares you, but maybe being an entrepreneur during a global pandemic is a sufficient answer to that. So, you know, tell me a little bit about how, you know, future aspirations for your venture and or whatever piece of advice you might give to an alumnus or student listening today who's thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, maybe both if you're willing. And Faizan, you've got the floor. Why don't we just keep going with you for that?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the advice part and then we can roll back into the other one. I want to make sure there's time for everybody. So my personal mantra has always been just that life is honestly too short not to take calculated risks. You know, there's always an easier path that kind of acts as a roadblock that prevents you from challenging yourself and making riskier decisions. And it's always tempting to take that path of least resistance because honestly, that's the most convenient path. But it's often not as rewarding. So both in terms of your personal fulfillment and also in terms of what you want to achieve from your career, there's just a very distinct line between entrepreneurship and just the risk-averse route. And I just think that in today's world, there are so many reasons why almost everybody should go at least explore entrepreneurship and explore the idea of launching something themselves. There's all kinds of funding available and there's all kinds of loans available you could take. And a lot of it is less risky than what meets the eye. So my advice, whether it is having gone through the experiences that I did, just bet on yourself. And especially while you're younger, I just think that the results pan out over a longer time. And it's just a lot more rewarding, both mentally, physically, and just in terms of the general fulfillment that you get.
Thank you so much, Spencer.
I think what Faizan just said, I completely agree with. We always look for people who bet on themselves. I would say my biggest advice is to really just simplify it. Simplify the entire thing, right? When you think of entrepreneurship and you think of starting your own company, it can be very overwhelming. And I would say simplify everything you do, from that first customer to the first product, to the first round of funding. If you can just think of ways, you know, people always talk about the minimally viable product and what's the least amount you can do in order to get it into the customer's hands, and think about how you can apply that to every aspect of being an entrepreneur. Not necessarily quitting your job, but if you have an idea, put together some mock-ups and sell it to your initial customer and see if there's something there before you take the leap. And so how can you just simplify this entire thing to take the leap of faith?
Wonderful. And Caren.
I think one thing I've learned is that, you know, a lot of people have come up to me over the years and said, well, I had the idea to start a vinyl factory and I'm going to do it. I've run into people who've told me they're starting their own vinyl factory so many times. It's really hard. An idea is nothing if you don't have execution and if you don't have, especially the right people around you. You know, one of the things I've learned a lot is the value of asking for help and advice. And it's not a weakness to do that. It is so critical and you learn so much from other people. So for anybody who wants to get into entrepreneurship, just always maintain a focus on learning. I still, you know, go to the library and read about vinyl and take phone calls with people who are 30 years, 40 years ahead in their career and just ask them for advice. I'm not threatening to them, right? They've established much bigger factories. Just having that learning focus matters so much. The other piece of advice I give to entrepreneurs is to realize that as much as we say, follow your dreams come with an expense. There is a sacrifice you have to make. You know, I spent 5 years at Google saving a lot of money, you know, eating all my meals there, like living very frugally, so that when the time came for me to make this leap, that I would have enough security to do that correctly. And I think it's unfair to say follow your dreams without acknowledging that you will have to make sacrifices. You will have to move across the country or, you know, do other things. Ultimately, for me, it's been so much more life-giving to do something I'm so excited about, to build something from scratch, and to know that I'm going to take those skills wherever else I go. But it did mean giving up a pretty cushy salary and a pretty secure job, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Thank you so much for all of that advice and inspiration. I think we'll pause for a moment and ask Amelia to weigh in with, I see some questions in the chat, and I know you have separately some Q&A questions, so just go for it until you run out of steam, and then I'll pick back up.
Great, and thank you to all three of you. Thank you, Andrea. We have quite a few questions. The first one is from Eric, and he's asking, what advice do you have for someone who has an idea and can see the strategy, the vision, but doesn't have the technical background to build it themselves, sort of wants to get off the ground? And the question is for all of you, so feel free to jump in.
I can start. I think the first piece of advice I would have is, to try to find a technical co-founder, right? I think there's a lot of resources out there, and there's a lot of, connect to fellow Goizueta alumni in the Atlanta ecosystem. I can talk about, how Goizueta and Georgia Tech have formed partnerships in order to help facilitate that. But also, I think going back to the point of simplifying, right? I think before you do that, before you found that technical co-founder, you can always just simply, draw some designs, right? And if you have the strategy and you have the ideas, make some mock-ups, right? Bring those mock-ups to your initial customers, validate those mock-ups, really get a commitment for those folks to pay you. And then before you even start building things, there's a lot you can do to validate whether or not you really want to pursue this opportunity or not.
Yeah, I agree with Spencer 100%. I see so many people jump to making the product because it's the exciting thing. And you're like, I know what I want to do without validating the market or, doing the basic pieces that are so much easier. But schools really are amazing. When I was in Boston, I went and knocked on doors at the MIT Media Lab a lot just to see what people were working on. Here in University of Texas, there's a program to commercialize technology too. I feel like universities, but especially one like Emory that has such a robust alumni network and so many partnerships, is really a valuable place to find hungry young talent of people, who would help you. We at Gold Rush have a team of 6 MBA interns working for us on a consulting project, plus 2 undergrad BBA students working on projects. And we treat them like entrepreneurs in residence and give them a lot of flexibility. And the amount of ideas and work that has come from that and the excitement they bring as students is just phenomenal. I love hiring interns to help us validate problems before we then go make the investment in hiring a full-time person.
Faizan,
I can quickly weigh in as well. So I actually had a very similar problem. So that's very relatable because I could not have even dreamt about building the business that I did without my technical co-founder. And we have very defined roles in the business as well. So I would handle a lot of the business type aspects, including fundraising and market planning and things like that. And he would basically build a product. And I actually met him at one of these events that was structured around meeting co-founders. It was called a pitch night, and it was organized by UPenn, which I'm sure there are versions of that at Emory as well. But it was designed for you to come and pitch your idea and see if someone from that very small audience was interested in partnering with you. I know there are a lot of virtual events that also help facilitate that. There are a lot of these email listserv. There's one for the Founders Club of UPenn that I know I've personally witnessed a lot of people email and saying, hey, I'm building this product. And to Spencer's point, if you have some traction you can use as a hook, it helps tremendously. So I've seen emails come through saying that I have a product, I have 2 people willing to pay for it tomorrow. I just need someone to build this. And then you have a lot of the technical folks jump in and say, you know what, I'd love to partner with you on this. So just don't be afraid to ask people for help and don't be afraid to ask people to connect you to others. I think that's the best way to meet people.
Great, thank you all 3 of you. This question is for Spencer. It's from Charlie Getz, who you were a student at. And he's asking if you can tell us, what did you learn from your previous businesses that helped you in making this business successful?
Sure. Yeah, Campus Bubble was, again, first business out of school. We wrote the business plan in Andrea's class. A lot of the angel investors that we have today in Relay that were our angel investors before we got venture money, I met in Charlie's class, Eric Hartz and Michael Cohn, who I know is on your panel. There's still, Eric is one of our advisors, and Michael helped us raise one of our rounds. What I learned the most, it's a tough question. I think it really is around the power of networking. I think Caren said it really well when she said, have no ego, right? Have some humility, know what you don't know, and the power of networking to really help you in all different aspects of the business is super valuable. And I would say that was one big thing. I think the second big thing is the ability to really understand when something's not working. Right? You got to be really honest with yourself. And I think at Campus Bubble, we spent a little bit too much time before pivoting and just believing we're going to get there. And a couple years in, we pivoted too late. And that's ultimately why we had to sell the company. But I think in this current business, Ryan and I, we put out 6 different versions of our product before we got one that before we had product market fit. And so to really answer the question, it's the ability to really be tough on yourself and to admit to yourself when something's not working and be able to pivot.
Thank you, Spencer. This question is really for all of you. When you were developing your MVP, how much did the product concept change from inception to MVP, and what was the journey like?
My answer is probably the shortest, so I can go first. It didn't change much. Our MVP was basically a very poor quality pixel density, a very pixel dense monitor that was strapped to the top of a car using low quality racks. The product that we have today in the market in a very large scale is basically the same product, but it has much better display quality, nice racks that don't damage vehicles. But the higher point there would be that the MVP shouldn't deviate too much. It should just be a very low cost test product that helps you either validate or prove something else out about the product that you can use feedback for to improve the actual unit.
Mine is a little harder because I had to build a whole factory to start making product, and take that leap. I will say this, one of the things that we did out the gate at Gold Rush Vinyl was to say we were only going to serve independent musicians who are not on major record labels, meaning artists that are represented by themselves, they own the rights to their music, that didn't have people working on their behalf, because what we identified in the market is that was the biggest portion of the market and the people for whom vinyl mattered the most, but they didn't have access to the factories that were locked up by the 3 major record labels, Warner, Universal, and Sony. A mistake we made was when business got tough, deciding we should take some jobs that are bigger, that are outside our scope. And it had a ricochet effect on our ability to serve the people we set out to. Every time we go back to the financial models and to the operational models, the original MVP product of what Gold Rush Vinyl should be holds in terms of how much money we make off of those jobs, the operational efficiencies. And I'm lucky that we haven't signed any big deals that got us away from that. But I caution people, when Target or REI or some big vendor comes calling with bad financial terms for you, or something that's going to disrupt your ability to move quickly in the market, just be cautious of that. Be cautious, because the big accounts might seem like great fit.
Spencer, you can go ahead.
Then undermine what you're doing. Back to our Enrush desk.
We've thrown out lots of MVPs. I would say the most important thing about an MVP is we have the rule of 3. So when we line up 3 customers that are willing to pay for something, that's when we build it. And I think I can't emphasize the importance of just before you build something, have the sales acumen to be able to get on the phone, make some cold calls, and line up some customers around just concepts and designs. And there's tools out there like Envision and Figma that allow you to really mock something up and create the illusion like it's a real product, and really show those customers and then ask them what they're willing to pay for it, right? And so I think the importance of the MVP is, in my mind, we haven't really built MVPs. We've just built design concepts, and we've iterated on those design concepts like crazy before they go into development, until we have multiple customers that are willing to pay us. Sometimes we even have signed agreements, and then we go back and build the product. We call it telling the truth in advance, but we know we can execute on it. But I think it's the importance of really just, again, simplifying the process.
Thank you. I think we're going to have time for one more question, which I'll ask in a second. But the first quick service announcement, we will have a bit of a break networking session after this. So I posted a link in the chat if you can all save it later for the participants so that you can go into the networking. So I'll ask the last question. This one's from David, an alum. He's asking, what techniques and tools do you use to assess product market fit on an ongoing basis?
I can jump in on that one. What we still continue to do a lot to this day is just doing customer interviews. It started pretty simple. We would send Google surveys out to get an idea on how people would perceive this, how they would react, and make some kind of inferences based on that. Now it's a lot more complicated. So we have the resources, so we actually construct actual focus groups of riders and drivers, and so we figure out what actually our future iteration of the product would be. But at the essence of it all, it should just be asking questions directly to your customers and your suppliers and your largest partners. I think Spencer alluded to this earlier, but the customers are basically all that matter at the end of the day. So as long as your future vision is aligned with whatever they're doing, your product market fit will follow.
I can jump in. You know, COVID really accelerated our business. We went from, I think, 0 to 4 to 300 customers in the span of a year, and multiple rounds of funding around the thought process of contactless payments and moving away from paper-based solutions. I think product market fit, it really is a feeling, as kind of how I thought about it. You know, when you have your product in 20, 30, 40 different customers' hands, and they're not really asking you for anything new, but you can really sell that solution to the same type of customer, and it's just configurability around the product instead of new concepts or new ideas. You kind of feel it, and then you know that you can just take that solution, freeze it, and then just sell it to the rest of the market. So that's kind of how I've thought about it when taking products to market.
And for us, we do a lot of ghost shopping of competitors and seeing what their pricing model is. But we're very, for a manufacturer, but especially in an old industry, a really data-centric company. We look a lot at, you know, what does the data say? You know, for example, a lot of our competitors have entire staffs for quality assurance, but they, you know, there's no need if their product is good in the first place. We do a lot of work to look at the quality of the product going out the door and what return rates are to decide if we need to have a whole quality assurance team up front. We just pour over the data, but also then, you know, customer feedback, trying to be empathetic, particularly in a pandemic. We're finding that customer behavior has changed very dramatically, particularly something like us where they feel like the order is something they can control, just trying to be empathetic within that. And making sure that we take time to hear a customer's feedback out and balance that out, because as we used to say at Google, data doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the whole truth.
And I think that we will leave that as our parting shot. So Caren, thank you very much. And thank you to each of you. I am I'm incredibly inspired by you. I am humbled by how much more you now know than me, and a little scared by that, and super, super proud to have you as representatives of Goizueta, of entrepreneurship at Emory, of all the things that we hope we stand for in trying to facilitate a place where people can come and at least, if not launch in the moment, at least acquire the skills and the confidence that will help them do so in the future. And of course, the other part, and it shouldn't go without saying, is we know your time is really, really valuable. So the generosity of spirit you display in being willing to come back and give back with your time to the next population of entrepreneurs is very much appreciated. So thank you all three so much. And thank you to all participants on the call. For those of you who want more, you are invited to this mixed tracks meeting, which the link is in there. And then I want the three of you to know that Burdette is shouting in the chats that she's so impressed. And I know if you live for nothing else, you live for a shout out from Burdette. So you've all three got one. So congrats on that. Thank you guys so much. Thanks to everybody. We are concluded.